Welcome back to Skip E Lowe's Looking at Hollywood. We have such a great... I'm sorry.
Take a stop. We'll try it again, folks.
How's it out to see theater?
Tape is rolling.
Theater? Theater, yeah. It's good theater.
Oh, yeah.
Santa Monica.
Yeah. Did a very interesting production here.
I heard about it a while ago.
Right on the floor, please.
Welcome back to Skip E Lowe's Looking at Hollywood. We have such a great show here today. We have a woman with such class, it almost makes me want to zip up my top. This woman has won 3 Emmys for her wonderful performance in a television series we've all loved and remembered. Barbara Bain, a woman who's never known a mission to be impossible. So why don't we eavesdrop with Skippy and Barbara Bain now?
Barbara,
Yes.
actually, where are you really from, originally?
Where was I born?
Yeah, originally you grew up.
Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago,
Yes,
really?
indeed.
Rockford, Illinois.
Really?
Originally. Yes, actually, before
Went to the University of Illinois.
Northwestern?
No,
Or
downstate, Champaign, Urbana.
Champaign, Illinois.
Yes,
what a
indeed.
school.
Yes, indeed.
Acting started?
No.
What? Tell me.
No, well, actually, I wanted to be my first grade teacher, I think, as a child. I adored her, of course, and set out in life either to teach or do social work or something very, very committed to the world. And I wandered, literally, into a dance class at the university, became enamored of dance, came back home, and wended my way to New York to study with Martha Graham. That was my beginning touch.
Right.
Barefoot on the floor, and exposure to the performing arts. I started as a dancer.
As a dancer in
Then-
Manhattan?
Yes. My little leotard and my very serious look, and my hair pulled back very tight.
Right.
Incredibly serious. And it was a wondrous world, and I adored it.
And how long were
then
you...
kind of backed into acting, which I had not considered. Both of my roommates at college were in the drama department. I thought that was amazingly heroic, that they knew how to do that. And it did not occur to me to do that. I was basically a very shy kid who'd read everything practically, or thought I did, in the library. And probably that's wherein all that was born, but I was not aware of it.
Right.
And I wandered into an acting class.
Which one, may I ask?
It was Kurt Conway, who was teaching in New York in the West 50s, and a couple of flights of rickety steps. I was modeling at the time in order to pay for my classes.
Right?
Yeah. And I walked into this theater space and was called, you know, to get up and do something. I could do nothing. I was absolutely hopeless. But
why do you say that, hopeless?
I just was not... that whole adventure, it was very early days for me. I was not immediately good at it, let's put it that way.
Do you remember your first scene when you did that at the acting class?
And let me just say that even though that occurred, that moment of really being quite extraordinarily inept at what I was trying to do, which was a new feeling for me. I was rather skilled at most things I had tried to do, so something shocking about not being able to do this. I was also have a trait which used to be called stubbornness, and I don't know what they call it now, but not a much admired trait, really. It was always kind of said in a negative way to me, but it stood me well because I was simply damned if I wasn't going to learn how to do this and do it well. I stayed in class for a long time, and underlying that there was some kind of incredible sense of coming home. I didn't know why, but my feet on that stage floor and in that place felt like home to me. I had no reason to feel it as home, but it felt like home. So I decided to just get good at it. And that's what I did.
How did you get good at it,
I
Barbara?
stayed in classes. I
You
studied.
studied?
Did scene after scene after scene, many of which I was not particularly suited for. I worked with Lee Strasberg. He was my teacher. After Kurt, I spent one summer session at the neighborhood playhouse.
You
then
did
I was
study
in,
the method acting, though. So
yes.
you did method.
I am a method actress. That is what I am, whatever that means, and it means a lot of things.
Right.
Lee was a remarkable teacher, remarkable. I worked with him in private classes and then eventually auditioned for the studio.
Right.
Became a member. And I've always stayed in workshops and classes and tried things and done things. I still also take dance classes. There's the process itself is still of interest to me.
Right.
And what ultimately happens, and I encourage anybody that's in classes, and certainly if they're not to get into classes.
Right.
I found in later years when I went back to the theater to do rather massive, challenging work, kind of work that I found myself asked to do very pleasantly. Everything I had ever done in a class, every time I'd ever either fallen on my face or achieved what I'd set out to do, everything was there for me and useful to me. It was wonderful. I was so excited to find that all of that mattered. Every one of those classes, every one of those exercises.
So that is very important for young people
I think
to
so.
keep studying. Even if you're a star, you keep your tools sharp if you're not working. Am I right?
You have to. You just have to, because otherwise you're out of touch with your own instrument.
Yes.
You need that ongoing ability to observe people,
Right.
to watch, to see behavior, that it feeds you all the time, and you need to do that.
Let's go back.
Let's go
Robert Bain.
Yeah.
First on stage, theater, off-Broadway, Broadway, first.
The very first professional job I had, which was after 2 years of studying. I did not go out to audition until I stayed in those classes.
You didn't?
And I got the first thing I went to audition for.
Wow, isn't that great?
And then I never stopped working.
So you did not go out. People study maybe a month and then they go out. You wouldn't advise that at all?
No, because once you're out there, you can fail in class.
Right.
You better not out there. There's too much competition, and it's very easy to say next and get the next person in there. You better be damn good when you're out there. The competition is fierce, and it's difficult. All situations, both theater, film, they're all difficult to perform in the circumstances, because the circumstances aren't helpful. So you need every piece of your own sense of yourself to stay there and come up with something under those conditions.
Yes.
And the only way you can achieve it is by doing it. You can't do it when somebody's
regardless if it's a barn. Am I right, darling? Regardless if it's a barn. I don't care where.
Yeah, anywhere.
It doesn't matter.
Anywhere.
Am I right?
Anywhere, exactly.
So, the very first, you said you got your very first professional job. What was it? Do you remember?
It was understudying in a Broadway production which was going out on a national tour of Middle of the Night, a Patty Chayefsky play that Edward G. Robinson was touring in. And that is what brought me to Los Angeles. 26 weeks, I think, on tour. And he was making a triumphant return to his home, playing this
Edward G. Robinson.
Role that he'd received a lot of accolades for. And actually, I think at the same time as we were going into rehearsal, I got my first film job, which was a television series that was shot in Rockport, Massachusetts. And Larry Hagman and I were star-crossed lovers.
Really? Okay.
I was a lobster fisherman's daughter, and my father did not want me to marry him, but I did anyway.
So Edward G. Robinson had a lot to do.
It was all at the same time. I also got my first under five line part on the very last of the live craft television theaters.
Right.
It came from the old Brooklyn studios.
Really?
I had an under 5 line part, which I was just ecstatic about.
So Edward G. Robinson had a lot to do with you then?
Well, no, not directly, but he was the first, I would say, major star that I was exposed to in a production sense.
Right.
And we
Did you
were
learn
together.
anything from him at all, thinking back at the time?
Did I learn anything acting-wise from him?
Did you learn his secret little technique from Edward G.?
He was an extraordinarily technical actor.
Right.
And was very, very, he did exactly what he did each night. There wasn't a lot of fluidity in it, and that in itself was amazing to me. It was not how I was being trained necessarily,
You never do
though
the
I
same
was
thing. Right.
being trained to produce. It would just might be that minute off
Right.
or that second different or something. He was capable of that, and always indeed did just that. And it was fascinating to be involved.
Yes.
It was fascinating to be involved with Patty Chayefsky,
Was it
who
ever?
even at that point with the show having played on Broadway very successfully, still wanted passionately to rewrite the ending. He never was given the opportunity to, but he'd come in to rehearsals
Right.
all the time and say, I got this new thing. Why don't you hear it? You do this. He says that. And he'd show us all the pages, and we'd go back to doing it the way it had been done. He was a remarkable.
Mission Impossible.
Yes.
Come on, let's
Yes.
jump to that.
Why not?
How
Good
did
job.
Barbara
Good
Bain
job.
get it? I mean, because you're the first lady. You're, as a household lady, I mean, come on, you weren't a housewife. You weren't a sexy girl, actually. You know, you were an intelligent actress in this Mission Impossible.
It was an interesting thing. Bruce Geller, who created the characters,
Right.
had written the part of Roland Hand, the Man of a Thousand Faces,
Right.
for Martin.
Right.
We knew Bruce. He was a young writer just out from New York, and we were just out from New York, and we all kind of grabbed onto each other in a workshop,
Right.
in an acting workshop. And Bruce had written the part for Martin, the sleight of hand, the changing of the faces, all of that for the actor in Martin. And when he went to write the girl,
Right.
as she was called at the
Right.
time, he inadvertently wrote me in.
Is
He
that
didn't
right?
realize it till he went to start casting it.
Right.
And in other words, he sat down to write for Martin. He sat
Right.
down to write the girl, and I kind of crept into it.
I see.
So when I went to cast it, it was just after, you probably hit the most pertinent thing about the character, and that is that she did have to be up there with the boys. She had to be intelligent. She
Very.
was not stirring a pot
Not
and
at
saying
all.
yes,
As
dear,
a
no,
house lady.
dear, and
No.
all of that. He wanted a certain kind of sex appeal,
Yes.
but but mixed with the girl next door. It was a hard thing to cast at the time in Hollywood, as women were being streamed really to be either or.
Yes.
And he wanted this combination. I think there were a lot of other actresses around probably at the time who could have been cast in it, had they not themselves been misled by what they thought was expected
Right.
of them. So people were either very done up a la Monroe or very cooled down a la Gene Kelly,
Right.
Grace Kelly.
Grace
so there
Kelly.
wasn't that in-between thing, and that's what Bruce wanted. And he started to cast it and found himself in some difficulty and said, Barbara. So I came in and went through the audition process.
Right.
And
You
saw
did go
all
through the audition.
people. Oh, yes.
Even
many
he
times.
wrote the part for you.
Many times.
Isn't that
They were
amazing?
uneasy about an unknown girl.
Right.
The person who had to ultimately pass on me was Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball.
And that was
Why is that?
because she owned Desilu at the time, was being produced at Desilu. And
Oh.
there I was being asked to go in for final approval to meet Lucy.
Right. Were you
So
excited?
I did.
Were you
I was excited. I was concerned. I was nervous. I had the last show I had done was a Dick Van Dyke show.
Right.
It was comedy.
You were the girl next door.
I
all
was the
time.
girl. No,
Next-
I played Dick's
girlfriend.
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 Right.
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
next, okay.
But never got married.
No.
That's right. So we're going to
we
talk
wait
about that.
for,
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Go ahead.
So I had a half-hour comedy film when one asks, can I see your
See.
last thing, you know, and I didn't want to go in there and show Lucy a comedy film. I mean, I couldn't. I said, I'm kidding myself. I mean, here's this lady who does it all, does it great. I just felt that it was a brazen act, and it had nothing to do with mission.
Right.
So I said to my agent, don't show her that. Let me just go in and talk to her.
Right.
And I did, and here we are. I did the show.
And you did
she
the
was
show.
very good. She checked me out sort of head to toe. She was very, very sweet, and she said, why not? You know, she thought I was fine.
How many years in Mission Impossible? How long?
I was on it 3 years.
3 years. Enjoyed it?
I loved it.
Did you really?
More than enjoy. It was a very, very wonderful experience for many, many reasons, not the least of which, as I said before, when I was originally cast, it was the girl.
Yes.
There wasn't a clarity really about how they were going to use that character.
Right.
And when Bruce brought in, there were 2 writers who were brought in shortly after we started shooting who were able to write the show. It was not an easy show to write. And they were terrific at it, and it was William Reed Woodfield and Alan Balter. They started writing for my character. And they'd kind of expanded a little in one episode, and then I'd get very excited, and I'd be able to do what it is they had written. They'd get excited that I could, in fact, do it, and they'd say, well, what about, can she play this? Let's write it. And it was a love affair. They fell in love, and it was just a kind of expanding of that original concept.
Right.
And nothing was left out. They just kept trying all kinds with an old blind Russian Tsarina. Fine, we did that. It just kept... And it was a dream role as a result for an actress.
How many
I got
characters
to do
were on
everything.
that, Robert?
The main characters, there were 5.
Who were they?
There were 5 of us.
Who were
there
these?
were,
Please.
in the first year, Steve Hill.
Right.
In the second year, and from then on, it was Peter Graves,
Peter Graves,
Greg Morris, Pete Lupus, Martin
Landau, and
me.
yourself. Martin Landau got into your life. Tell me about Martin Landau into Barbara Bain's life.
Well,
how did
Martin
you meet?
Landau and I met in New York in an acting class.
As an acting class. Go
Yes.
ahead. Let's get back.
And we were a couple for a long time. We were married when we went on the road with Middle of the Night. We had already been married.
So
it
you
was
have
in
been
essence
married.
our honeymoon. Many people thought we met on mission. We didn't. I already had 2 children. We had 2 children.
You had 2 children when you were on mission, really?
When we did the pilot, I had Juliet was 9 months old. And Sue was 4 and a half.
So you have 2 girls?
2 girls.
2 girls.
Grown women.
2 grown women. Are they in the business at all?
They're great, very productive, very vital, very exciting people. Yes, is the
I love
answer
what you
to that.
said. Great people. You're
They
not
are.
saying
They are.
You're not saying in the business. I'm saying
They are.
Oh, they are. Okay, because
Susan
you're not saying that.
Susan is a writer. My older daughter is a writer,
Okay.
director. She's done a lot of her own work off-Broadway in the theater. And in the last number of years, she's worked in various capacities with Francis Coppola. She just finished 10 months as the associate producer on Dracula.
Oh, great.
So she's just done that work and quite well. It was an extraordinary experience. And she's now back up in San Francisco looking at projects that she wants to. She also produced a low-budget picture for his commercial pictures last year.
Right.
So she's been very active in all of that. Juliet, who is has been trained as a dancer, began to act a couple of years ago, and she's a extraordinarily gifted, beautiful, wonderful actress. So
Barbara
yes,
Bain.
they're in the business.
I know.
But when
You
you
didn't
say that,
say
it's
that.
kind
I
of
know.
well,
I
it
know.
sort of shrinks it down, and I see them both as these glorious explosions.
I hear you.
I don't see them
I
as kind of
understand.
shrunken down into categories.
Yes, Danny.
I thought they met on Mission Impossible.
Is that
I
what
was
you
one
thought?
of those people that thought that. I guess everyone did.
You're one of those people?
Yes, I did.
Well, I knew that they didn't meet. I wanted her to say it, but...
I said it.
Yeah, you certainly did. Barbara Bain.
Yeah.
After you went to London, come on, let's
Yes.
get that. You got
went
away from
from-
America 4 years, 5
Well,
years,
we
whatever.
lived in London for 4 years, filming a series that was, they came to America to get us
you,
to
yeah.
go over to do a project called Space 1999.
Right.
Very exciting project in terms of concept. It had to do with a moon base alpha, people who were based on the moon.
Right.
And because of loading up the far side of the moon with nuclear waste, it explodes, and we're thrust out with no orbit in this kind of self-contained unit, looking for a place to continue our lives, maybe, because we keep running into hostile things or various excitements. It was produced in England, and it was kind of fun. It was beautifully, the special effects were quite extraordinary. We had a young man who was working at the time. The special effects were done at a separate studio, away from the main shooting.
Right.
And we got word that he was leaving for California to do a special project, something to do with space, something called Star Wars.
Right.
He came and won an Oscar for that. He was a very gifted special effects kid person. It was wonderful living in England for that 4 years, for many, many reasons.
Your children went to school there?
Yes. They went to school there. That was a wonderful kind of experience. We were able to travel because everything's so close and take them to various places in Europe, etc., on longish weekends or shortish, whatever. And for me, for instance, as a kid growing up in the Midwest, when I studied ancient Greece, it was contained in a book. It was on a flat surface, generally in a lithograph or something like that. And I would muse on it and wonder about it and dream about it. When my younger daughter was in 3rd grade in England and she was studying ancient Greece, we said, let's go.
Let's go.
And plopped her right down in the Parthenon. Well, it was wonderful to be able to do that and see your kids have that kind of opportunity.
So Barbara Bain,
yes.
had a good time so far.
Oh,
huh?
yes.
You've had a good time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Any regrets in your life at all right now, Barbara?
Oh,
Looking
no.
back,
I don't think so.
You,
not regrets. I'm not much for doing that. I don't spend any time doing that. I wouldn't know what to regret if I sat down and thought about it in that sense.
Writing a book?
Am I writing a book? I'm doing some writing, but not necessarily an autobiography or anything like that. I'm
doing
writing
some writing.
Yes.
Like what?
Oh, various things.
Various things? Because you know what you do right now. I heard you're a teacher, something with Screen Actors Guild. What did you do with Screen Actors Guild?
I'm not teaching.
No,
I'm doing something else that came about in a very interesting way. It came about, oddly enough, playing a game of, there's a board game around called Preference.
Preference, yes.
Okay. My younger daughter and her boyfriend came over to visit me, and we were playing Preference. Now, you pick those cards, and the other person's supposed to call what it is you will put in order of preference, what of those 4 things. Well, one of my cards was reading to children. And I did not put that in the first spot. And Juliet didn't win the point that she wanted to on the game. She said, well, wait a minute, you love reading to kids. How come you didn't put that down? And I heard myself saying, which was the logical answer, I don't do that anymore, honey. I used to do it when you were little.
Right.
And then I thought, well, why don't I do that anymore if it's something I like?
You do like to read to children?
Yes. Why don't I do it?
Right.
So I volunteered in a kind of daycare camp last summer or summer ago in Venice. Just I called around and asked would they want somebody to come down, sit on the grass, and read to the kids. And they said yes. And I did. And it was wonderful.
How
the
wonderful.
Kids adored it. I adored it. And I said, okay. And I walked away when the summer was ended, and then I thought, well, that's that. I'll probably do it again next summer. And I thought, wait a minute. We have a resource in this city unlike any other. About 32,000 members, my colleagues in the Screen Actors Guild.
Right.
All of whom can read. All of whom rather like an audience.
Yes.
So I called the Screen Actors Guild Foundation and the board and queried as to whether or not they'd be interested in setting up this kind of program.
That's great.
They were very excited about it. Within a very short number of days, there were 200 volunteers without even trying to make it fully known. Then I went to the mayor, Tom Bradley, in the city, and asked him how could we swiftly plug this program in? What would be the least complicated way where we actors could go out? And he had already overseen a quite wonderful program that's going on in the schools called the LA Best program.
Right.
It's an after-school program primarily for kids, of course with permission of their parents, to stay after school from 3 to 5 and sometimes even 6.
Right.
Because there's nobody home. So at school, they are introduced to sport activities. They can get help with their homework, music, all kinds of things. It was sitting there, that program. It's happening now. And we were able to plug right into that. So it took no great administration. It took very little to do. I went to the Amundsen Foundation and asked for a very small grant to administer it.
Great.
All of this took about 6 weeks. And as of November 1st, we started out, we're now in 24 schools, ongoing, all across the city.
Oh, I think
and
it's great.
we go out and we read to the kids, and the kids love it, and we love it. And
Annie, is that a good idea?
Having someone
simple.
like a Barbara.
It's wonderful. It's simple, but it's wonderful. We need this.
Yes.
Especially today.
Yes. Yes.
You are doing something fabulous.
Now it's going to go national.
It is?
The guild chapters all over the city, all over the country are interested in it, and people are volunteering in New York. They're setting one up, one in New Mexico, etc. So the program will have a national face.
What are the stuff that you read to these children? Stuff. Give me
Well,
an
it
example.
depends on the
And
age group. I asked for the kindergarten first graders. I want to catch them really young.
You like them, yeah.
Well, with the hope that they'll attach
Do you act when you read this, that when you do a little...
It depends. I mean, if
Yeah.
there are voices in them, you kind of find
You put-
yourself playing the voices. And if they all adore Dr. Seuss,
Yes.
which couldn't be a better training ground for doing Shakespeare just in terms of breath. 'Cause all those funny words and all those riffs that go on, and they adore those books. There are certain new books. I just received a lovely book from a children's author. She heard that I was doing this, and she sent me a copy of one of her stories, and I read it the other day, called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie.
Right.
Then all kinds of things happen. Well, anyway, the point is, you kind of gear it to the...
Right.
You can bring in your own favorites.
Yes.
I started with going in the attic and finding my kids' books, you know, when they were little.
I bet White House must love you right now, because President, that's what he really wants. The President,
Well,
Bush.
I don't know that, but
Yes.
that wasn't, you know, the reason
bet
I got started with it. I
No,
just
but-
wanted to... Kids, I found as a young child, reading made me feel incredibly powerful.
Powerful.
I thought, I can do anything. It made me feel like I could do anything. And it exposed me to absolutely everything.
Right.
And one could muse, if I were an architect, I could do this. Or
Yes.
some of the kids, for instance, don't even know or didn't that somebody draws the pictures often who is not the author. So you engage them in a dialogue. If this were your story, would you draw the monster this way? You know, and they'll say, oh no, I would make him purple. You know, and it just kicks off the issue of imagination and possibility and all of it.
You
So-
did a wonderful show in Santa Monica. I think it was at the Odyssey Theater, called Wings a little while ago.
Yes. Yes.
What reviews?
Yeah.
Come on, Barbara Bain.
Unbelievable.
The reviews. Tell me about the show, Barbara.
I'll tell you about the reviews. I read them.
And Happy Days, too.
Yes.
Come on.
I read them opening night, and then I didn't dare look at them again.
Really?
I thought, I didn't believe that I just read all that on the thing, and I waited till long after the show closed to read them again, because it was as if either they would go away, or I couldn't believe them. Beautiful. If I had gone home, and if one wanted to write one's own reviews, I could
Who
have
were some
done
of the
a better
people that
job.
came to see you, Barbara Bain? You must
Well, specifically you mentioned the Odyssey, and that was Sylvie Drake who wrote this
Sylvia
beautiful,
Drake, great, yes.
review in Wings, which was a beautiful piece of material that I much enjoyed doing. I had started back at the theater, doing theater with major roles. I was called from a theater in Seattle with this very simple question, would I like to do Long Day's Journey?
Yes. What a
And
hard
I said
show
a
that
very
is.
simple answer. I said yes, hung up the
Naturally.
phone, and then said, oh, wow.
Is that where you did it, up there?
Yes. And I went up there and worked on it, of course, and it was a great way to come back to the theater. I felt every night that I was climbing a mountain, but that I could make it. And I loved the feeling. It was just incredible.
Theater is great, isn't it?
Just fabulous.
Is that your first love, theater?
All of it.
All of it?
All of it. I mean, I just care about all of that.
So you do like
kind
the
of-
camera, and you like...
Yes, absolutely. It each has its own challenge. It each has its own rhythm and excitement and problems.
Right.
And they're hard to weigh. They're hard to weigh. When you're
Robert-
doing something like Happy Days, which I did at
It's great, yes.
the Beckett piece
yes.
at LATC, I was told
That's a
ahead
good
of time
Of course.
that was going to be harder than Wings, that it was the hardest piece in the English literature for
Right.
women, or a woman.
I saw you in that. I went to see you.
A pretty amazing piece of
Oh,
work.
it was wonderful. Wonderful, Barbara.
Thank you.
Really, you were wonderful.
Thank you.
Look, come on.
Yes?
You've had some tough years in your life, you know, raising your children.
They weren't tough. Raising my
was
kids
it-
was great.
Was it?
My kids?
You know,
No, I didn't
career.
have...
No,
yeah.
you've had some. So you've had good time in your life, then.
I've
You
had a
do-
good time in my life. I've had a good time. I have these...
Do you believe in fate, Barbara? Fate. Do you believe in
I'm
that?
not sure. There are certain inexorable things that seem to kind of find each other as you go around corners. I don't give it a lot of mystical credence. I'm not... I think about things in terms of relationships to things, and I'm not sure exactly if one is fated
Yeah.
for certain things. One may be driven, what one finds as one turns around the corners. There's certain ironies and there's certain amusements along the way and surprises.
As I sit here looking and thinking and talking to you,
Yeah.
as Barbara Bain, a very, very sophisticated lady. I mean, a lady who's tasted life. Do you have a man in your life?
No, not at the moment.
Why?
Well, I
I know
don't
you're busy
know.
with your children.
Oh,
teaching.
no, I'm not busy with my...
Yes, you
oh, you mean
are.
the little one
yes,
reading?
the little ones
No,
reading.
No.
But
What a question. Why?
Why?
I'm not opposed to the idea. Let's put it that way.
Is it difficult
Pardon me.
out there to find someone? Are you looking?
Sure.
You are looking?
Sure. The
Because some
modicum
people
of-
back out. They don't want
No, I'm backed out of anything. I used to say, fella had to be intelligent, good-looking, and have a great sense of humor. And now I'm thinking, maybe we'll just leave great sense of humor and
That's
get the other ones off the list.
That is my most important sense
I
of
think
humor.
that must be it.
Is it?
Sure.
Yeah,
and one needs it more as one goes.